On our episode today, I have Kareem. He's a CEO at Veiled. I'm really excited to have him here. I met him at a conference a little bit ago. He was on a panel with me, and it was one of those situations where some of the stuff he was saying just kept. I was like, yes, 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 and so it was just a matter of time before I got you here. So thank you so much for joining me, Kareem.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's get started and tell kind of the listeners who are you, where you work, kind of give us the background.
Yeah, so my name is Kareem. I'm actually kind of an outsider to e-commerce. I used to be an architect, and I was doing creative work on the side, which led to marketing, which led to advertising, and I started doing Facebook ads and performance marketing back in like 2013. Uh, and one of the clients I was consulting is the company that I'm working at now, which is Veiled. They're called. We were uh, At the time we were working on just getting the business off the ground, and maybe a year later they asked me to be the CEO, which is the role that I continue to hold today. Um, we're doing eight figures in revenue annually. We're 100% direct to consumer, with most of our business being in the U.S. And we're opening our first retail store in the summer.
Congratulations. Retail store is a big deal. I love that you guys are 100% direct to consumer, and mostly because it is a double-edged sword, right? Like the best part about being 100% D2C is you get real-time feedback real fast. You know exactly what to do, how to kind of manage against it. But having a wholesale network means more distribution, more brand awareness, and as well as like real time product feedback when you're talking to somebody, right? And so I know you spend a lot of time thinking about your product, how it impacts your marketing, and you've created a system in which how you do it from a D2C perspective. So can you talk to me about the connection between merchandising and marketing and your perspective on that?
Yeah. So the way I like to think about it is, imagine you had the hat store in Times Square, and people walk in and they think they're going to be buying a bunch of different hats, but all you have in stock are blue cowboy hats. So oddly specific, and maybe a color that doesn't really go along with that style. And so obviously your conversion rate is not going to be that high, even though you're in Times Square and you have infinite free traffic. Or take that perfectly stocked store, in reverse, and but you put it in the middle of the woods somewhere, so there's like zero foot traffic. You'll also not have a high conversion rate, even though you have the perfect store. But maybe people actually go and seek out your store in the middle of the woods,
Yeah.
since
You
there's
may you might have like a little bit better of a
yeah,
chance
exactly.
by having. I mean, that's like such a perfect example of just even that around how important product is. People will seek you in the woods if you have the
Yeah.
right product.
So that's something that like really stuck with me because at some point, there's kind of like a three-headed beast that runs Veiled. So the two founders and myself, and I'm responsible for like growth and finance and those things. One of the partners is responsible for the operations. We operate our own fulfillment center, and the third partner, she's the creative and like the spirit and like the soul of the brand. So everything beautiful about the brand comes, from her. So because I'm the numbers guy early on, it'd be like, hey, like how much should we order of this product? And I'm like, well, gee, I don't know. Maybe I should look into that. And so, start when you start diving into those metrics and like try to come up with like, some kind of like sound recommendation, you start to get into merchandising analytics pretty naturally. Except like I really wanted to figure out, and I wanted it to also sync up with upper funnel. So that was the beginning of like trying to find the connection between those two things.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when we were on the panel, you said something that really resonated with me, and it was a lot of times marketing kind of gets blamed for a product problem. And you know, being a media agency, we hear this a lot of like, why can't we scale? Why can't we do this? Or like, why are we kind of stuck where we're at? Um, and then, the moment a new product drops and the numbers look great, it's, wow, look at what we're able to do. Hey, marketing, why can't you scale us more? Why can't we grow more? So like, we're kind of always in this situation, but I love that you take the view of, um, the product matters, and it really is a unique perspective that I don't think a lot of people really understand the impact of.
Yeah, and just to shed a little bit more light on that, like we would have a lot of periods where suddenly performance is not great, versus the reference period. Maybe that's like the prior year or a similar kind of promo, but we just felt like things were off, right? And you kind of go at a surface level through all like the basic metrics that all of us look at, conversion rate, spend, whatever. And you're like, okay, well, there's nothing immediately jumping out at me as to be the issue. But then, you stumble across like the collections pages and like all of your top products are out of stock, right? So an example of like this kind of optimization, and by the way, I mean we have like probably 20,000 SKU variants at this point. We are a fashion brand and we have a lot of styles and colors, and so if you have a lower SKU count, it's probably harder for you to, or it might not be as critical to derive these sorts of insights, I guess, as like the SKU count goes down. But like, we sell headscarves. Our target audience is Muslim women, and the black scarf sells 3 times the rate of the white scarf. So when the black scarf is out of stock, I wouldn't be surprised that my MER, my ROAS or whatever is taking a significant hit because that is the highest selling product that we have in the store. So as time went on, we started to really never not know what's wrong with performance, right? We messed up a few times where we experimented with price and other things which really did impact the product market fit. But beyond that, it was always either pretty obvious, like, something wrong with the product. We've had issues where we've narrowed it down to, the audience, how we invested in audiences and how we constructed our audiences and things like that. But after we sort of became more robust in how we look at merchandising analytics, the number of times in the last, 2 years, let's say, that there was ever a situation like ever that we didn't know what was going wrong with performance was basically zero. Like there is not a single open-ended question right now for us, that has remained since we started to become more, more on top of merchandising analytics. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's a really valuable perspective for people to have and to really understand that, like, to understand the impact on marketing, you have to go beyond marketing. Like, don't just stop at, oh, it must be my audience, it must be my creative, it must be my landing page. There are other elements of it that you do need to take into account and kind of manage against. One of the things that you just said that was really interesting to me of like, uh, when your black scarf is sold out, which sells at 3x the return of the white, you expect to see a dip and you expect to kind of see it. And I can already hear other marketers in my head going, well, why wouldn't you just promote the white? Like, obviously, you're not advertising the white. You're just not pushing it hard enough. And so I know you and I have a perspective on this, but like, have you tried that?
Oh, you can definitely, and you should compensate. You have to roll with the punches. Like you're never gonna have the perfect hat store all the time.
Yeah.
But that is, you're working against the grain at that point because when everything is in stock, the natural demand is organized in such a way.
Yeah.
And we're talking about one product versus another, but when you're talking about a full index with thousands of products, optimizing all of them in aggregate, that has a massive impact on your ROI, your advertising ROI. So, and it could be like 60%, 70% or more.
Yeah.
So like you could probably, if someone's not doing this today, if they started to do it somewhat effectively, they could probably expect to double their MER.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting though because optimizing your product on the advertising side is really different than expecting that product to be sold.
Right.
Like the ad that is shown is not always the product that is then being purchased, and I
Mhm.
think that that's like an important
Mhm.
perspective to keep in mind and to kind of manage against.
Yeah, especially with like catalog and dynamic ads today, or being like the number one, the best performing strain of like, in terms of ad sets. Um, you're the creative ads, like the really creative, creatives that you publish that um, tell a story about a product or whatever, and pull them through like a specific funnel. They're not getting anywhere near as much visibility um, as like your dynamic ads, which are really just basically your product, right? Like, yeah, you can
Yeah.
customize them and add some flavor and whatnot, but so really, it really is all about your entire catalog, if you think
Yeah.
about it. And so you have to optimize that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, when you are looking at your catalog and you said, you want people to be optimizing for performance on that, how do you determine what
Mhm.
product is impacting your performance or marketing? How do you actually choose the products to promote and manage against? And I guess talk us through just that process for you.
Um, so so I mean, basically, we want to analyze, in any given period of time. So I'm forecasting, say for autumn winter next year. I'm going to look at the best reference periods I could look at. It's not always, autumn winter to autumn winter. It could be like a full year look back. Depending. You really have to like be in tune with how your team goes about the design process, and you also might want to experiment, comparing different reference periods and seeing kind of like what makes the most sense. And then once you kind of figured out what your reference is, what you're looking to uh, specifically measure is how many units were sold per day. And I look at units sold per day while in stock. What that gives me is, when I apply that across the whole catalog, is I can then see like, the share of the category sales velocity of a given product. So, for the scarves, like within scarves, you know, um, what share of scarves should I, purchase of which specific, SKU. So, and you do that by style. You can also then apply like, if I look at a specific collection and I'm trying to understand, say, my customer's size, um, it's probably more truthful to get how your what your customers' sizes are across categories, right?
Right.
And rather than like let the data be biased based on like a specific kind of like a style just happens to perform really well, so a lot of like mediums are being sold or whatever. So we try to kind of look at, when we're looking at size, we're looking at it like agnostic of everything else. When we're looking at color, we're trying to look at it as much as we can meaningfully agnostic of everything else. And
Right.
you hold those ratios, and you kind of just multiply them across. So like, the most popular styles multiplied those ratios, like in terms of their share of the pie, multiplied by the share of the pie for that size, et cetera, et cetera. And then you actually can generate a full draft PO, that's optimized by style, color, and size. At least that's how we do it. There's probably infinite ways to do this, but yeah, that's kind of how we go about it. And when we correct for units sold per day in stock, sometimes the data will suggest that we need to expand further an entire category, or a product, because it will say, basically what will end up happening is, suppose you had sold only 10 units in 10 days. Um, but it was only in stock for half of that period. So you probably could have sold 20 units instead. So that will increase like the ratio of that specific item within its like index. And so, for example, we sell these like traditional long dresses. They were 1.5% of units, so all units sold in one period. The data suggested that we should be selling them at 5%. We ended up doing that in the subsequent period. Like we ordered, which is a big jump. Like we allocated, tens of thousands
It's
of more
more than
dollars
it's
towards.
more than double, right? Like this is more than
Yeah,
double. So
yeah, it's like more than triple. And when we actually adjusted those ratios, we sold almost exactly at that new
that's kind of
ratio
crazy.
that the system had identified in the past. So that's a huge that and our MER also went up, right? Not just from that collection, but from like all the optimizations that we're doing. But and the funny thing about our business is as we've been doing this, our MER has been going up every year. Whereas like a lot of people I speak to, they're facing the opposite, they're experiencing like the opposite. So the only thing we are doing differently, and the one thing I'm finding we are consistently doing differently than most people is really on the merchandising analytics and how we tie it into like traffic and all that, which we get into like more on the upper funnel side. But and then maybe the other thing is like we're a little bit more centralized, whereas like some of our peers like they have a merchandiser who doesn't really interact with like the analytics team, who doesn't interact with like design, whatever. We're a little bit more centralized, so we're able to do these things, even though it's like more of a burden on the people responsible for those kinds of analyses.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always say like a head of ecom's a unicorn because they've got to understand merchandising, marketing,
Mhm.
development, data, and really have a good understanding of almost running their own business because it is its own business underneath, and it requires a lot of things to align to be very successful, right?
Mhm.
And so you need to be able to speak all of the languages. It is really interesting because I think I love whenever you and I talk, you have this framework from which you think about things and you always kind of follow that. So can you walk us through just your framework for metrics and how you look? Because there's a lot of data in our world, and there
Yeah.
does not need to be as much as there is because it can be overwhelming at times. So,
Yeah.
as a CEO, having that holistic view, how do you kind of just break it down into something you can actually do something with?
Oh yeah. So I probably do this more for my own selfish benefit of like not losing my mind every day, and trying to keep track of everything and know everything that's happening. My goal is really to identify problems, and solve them because I've already, hopefully I've already set a plan in place, at least one figures like that's the goal. Like you have a plan, you should be hitting certain metrics. So you're assuming you've already set your goals, you know what your revenue should be, all of that, right? If you're not there, then like you have other challenges. But like if you are there and you kind of know where you should be, and it's not just like you're rolling the dice every day, then you can look at it structurally, right? So um, the first thing is basically figuring out like, and we've had both. Like we're 100% bootstrapped. We're not funded. So, but we've worked with debt and whatnot. So there have been periods where like the mandate has been more like growth with little profitability or none, versus like, no, we need to be like super profitable. So you kind of like start there and you set your goals and whatever, and you look at like your top line revenue and everything, and you can look at your profitability, which is a little annoying with Shopify, but that's another conversation. So once you kind of have that, if you're off target, well, what is off? Are all the metrics off, like your conversion rate, your traffic
Mm.
in your traffic, and your CPM, and so on and so forth, or uh, or is it like just isolated to conversion rate, right? So if it's isolated to conversion rate, your traffic was great, like you drove enough traffic and everything, um, then you're kind of thinking two things, right? Because conversion rate, when it's isolated, it's basically product market fit.
Yeah.
It can be, it's in that moment, it's in the last day or two or whatever it is that you're looking at, but it's still like for that day or whatever, the demand just wasn't there.
Right.
Now, is it the market or is it the product? So if it's the market, it's implying more upper funnel. So you're gonna maybe want to check if there's been changes to the audiences. Has there been changes in the way the spend has been allocated? That's something that we ran into once where like literally this exact scenario, conversion rate was off, and it's like, okay, well, we brought enough traffic, we brought more traffic, but like performance just wasn't there. It turns out that Facebook had updated its the way you do campaign optimization, and basically it started to allocate more budget automatically towards colder audiences. And so we had to bring back a sidecar to force it to focus more on the warmer audiences, which is kind of what works with our business. And literally the performance reversed like the very next day. Like we
That's
were
kind of crazy.
down, we were back up to where we should be, like almost exactly. And that was the only difference, right? But like say it wasn't upper funnel, say like my advertiser was like, no, we've changed nothing, absolutely nothing has changed, everything is great. Um, then I'll start to look at, our stock outs, like in terms of our inventory, like are we, what's out of stock, like how should we be performing, etc. We're still not at the level where like I have a theoretical of like based on what's in stock, what my performance should be. That's pretty like advanced. I
That would be
hope that
awesome. Yeah.
there, yeah. But more so just like common sense, like looking at like top selling products, what's in, what's not, having discussions with the team, etc. Then it's like, okay, you know, um, your best sellers are just like out of stock. Maybe you had a few really good past weeks or months, and you overperformed, and now like you're naturally just going to
Oh, you're,
underperform because
yeah, you're edging her.
you couldn't get your stock here in time, right? So that's okay too. Like we're actually running into that issue right now. Like I was telling you before the call, we're up 85% year over year, and I expect that. And our performance has been amazing, but I'm really worried about like the next couple of months. I don't know if my shipment will come here in time for spring summer so that we can maintain this like growth. I fully expect that we are going to be low on stock and the performance is not going to be there, or not going to be able to maintain this. But then I can go to my team and I can also like, so we do this thing where if we know that the inventory is not there, we will
Mhm.
reduce spend and reduce the traffic coming to the site, um, just to kind of keep the MER at par. And we just see this phenomenon like play out. I don't have the best explanation for it, except for it kind of does make sense to me, especially when we go back to the example of like the hat store. Like you probably want less people in your store when you have less product. I think that just kind of makes sense. But it seems like, and I think this is why, like with the way the catalog ads work and all these things with the algorithm, it seems that when we're kind of low on stock, as we reduce the traffic, we're able to maintain our MER at like a certain sweet spot. And then as like demand, product is there, promotion, whatever, and we're demand is there, then we'll just like bring the traffic up because there's that all that demand. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting.
anyway, that's I think
No,
I
that's
talked
like a
in there, but
no, I love that. I love that perspective around things because you definitely have this like step-by-step view of things that I think is unique to people. Like on the media side, we've got our indicators at CPM, click-through rate, CPC, conversion rate, CPA, right? Like I want to know that all of these are working. If it's CPM that's the issue, then it's an audience targeting. Let's take a look at audience targeting. If click-through rate's the problem, it might be audience targeting, but it probably is creative. So let's take a look at
right,
creative and offer, right? Like so it kind
exactly,
of helps us diagnose where to look at things. And then, you know, marketing and growth is a resource allocation game, right? Like you are making that decision between do I invest in new inventory? Do I invest in marketing? Well, it doesn't make sense to invest in marketing if I don't have the inventory. And now I can kind of balance that. On our end, it's a resource allocation around do I spend this next hour wasting my time looking at audiences? Well, that's not really going to move the needle. I should look at my creative or I should look at my landing experience, right? Like where am I going to see the best impact? And so I think your perspective and your framework by which you say, okay, I create this spreadsheet and I look at these KPIs and I then at any given day know, all right, this is red. I need to focus my time and energy here. We need to figure out what's going on here. Is it a blip? Is it a trend? Right? Like that framework from which you think around things is really important. I know we're coming up on time, and so I want to be conscious of that. But Kareem, I really want to thank you so much for joining us today. And
my
where
pleasure.
can people learn more about you and check you out?
Uh, I'm on LinkedIn, Kareem Elgendy, and you can also reach out to me, Kareem at veld.com.
Cool. I'll include that all in the show notes too. So thank you so much, Kareem. Really appreciate it.